Today, I'm going to be reacting and responding to Dr. Mike's interview with Paul Offit. More about that in this video. Welcome to Republican Talks, everybody. I'm your host, Kenneth Glenn, and today I'm going to be reacting, like I said, to the Paul Offit interview with Dr. Mike. For those of you that don't know, Paul Offit is a vaccine scientist. He's been working with the COVID vaccine and the co-vaccine scientists, and he's one of the guys that did the most work when it came to getting the COVID vaccine stuff situated. So I'll be reacting to the interview and responding to some of the points that they make. So without further ado, let's get into this.
Where do you think this is all stemming from?
I think COVID was, regarding trust, a major step backwards. It wouldn't be what I would have guessed. I mean, if you look at the way this played out early on, you had a virus that raised its head in Wuhan, China in late 2019. Within a month, we had isolated that virus and sequenced it so we could make a vaccine. And then using a technology that we had never used to make a vaccine before, there was no previous experience. In 11 months, we had done 2 large clinical trials, the size of any typical adult or pediatric vaccine trial, to show that the vaccine was clearly effective and safe. And then we started immunizing people, 1 million people a day, 2 million people a day, 3 million people a day. By July of 2021, we had immunized 70% of the U.S. population.
So this clip comes from the first 5 minutes of the interview. And he's saying that COVID was a big step back when it came to trust. And I agree. I think COVID was a terrible... Scientists wanted people to trust science. Their response to COVID was the worst thing they did. Because, first of all, it was the biggest game of Simon Says ever. Every other week, it was Simon Says, put your mask on. Simon Says, take your mask off. You don't need it anymore. I remember at one point when I was in 10th grade when COVID hit, right? So when COVID first hit, everyone was like, oh, masks are stupid. Why would you wear a mask for COVID? Then eventually masks had to wear a mask going forward. They mandated the masks much later on. And then the companies who made the masks were putting labels on their products hey, don't use this for COVID. This isn't, these masks aren't meant for COVID. And I even made a video about it somewhere on my channel. It probably got deleted by now, knowing YouTube. The science saying hey, we don't know. They just kept pushing the envelope and saying, oh, this, and then changing their minds and going back and forth.
Oh, I mean, 30% of this country refused to get vaccinated. They didn't believe us. They didn't trust us, so much so that 300,000 people estimated died unnecessarily, chose to die, chose not to vaccinate themselves or their families. Why?
So this is one part of the interview I'd say I have to disagree with. I don't like what he says here. He says that it's the people who didn't get vaccinated's fault for dying, and I would disagree, because like I said before, you guys kind of dropped the ball when it came to trust. You guys kept pushing the envelope, and the scientists kept saying things that were just outrageous, and we kind of lost our ability to be able to even trust you guys. The reason why a lot of people didn't get the vaccine, he mentions that it's either rebellion to the government or whatever, but it's people are not going to play games with their own lives. If something is legitimately going to help you, people are not going to be oh, I'm not going to take that. I don't care if it helps me. People are going to take it. The problem with the COVID vaccine is that it wasn't. First of all, it wasn't even FDA approved for a year after it was mandated, which is insane to me that the vaccine wasn't FDA approved, but cigarettes are. Yeah, cigarettes were FDA approved, but the vaccine wasn't. According to the FDA, it'd be healthier for you to smoke cigarettes than to get the vaccine. I forgot to mention this in my video, but doctors also signed NDAs to hide many pieces of information from us, from the public eye. the whole immunity, natural immunity works as well as the vaccine does, and many other things. And that's another thing I wanted to bring up because I know I completely forgot. It completely passed my mind. I just thought about it. But yeah, that was another reason why I don't trust the vaccine because of all the NDAs behind it. Why are there NDAs being signed to hide information from us? Just absolutely insane to me. Plus, the politics behind the whole COVID vaccine was insane too. Like Cuomo didn't want anything to do with the COVID vaccine because Trump made it and he didn't trust him for some reason. But as soon as Biden took office, he just completely flipped views on the vaccine and thought it was the best thing ever. Like I said, you guys kind of dropped the ball with the whole trust thing.
I'm sure it exists rarely, but we don't see it. At this point, there's such a high level of natural immunity and natural immunity also protects.
So is that another one of the reasons why you're saying in a lower risk person getting a booster exposing to potential side effects is not warranted because of the level of natural immunity?
Yeah, I guess I think we should be humble about all this. I think we don't know. And I think that you should get a vaccine if the benefits are clear. And I think for people who are in high-risk groups, I think the benefits are clear.
I really, really like what Paul says here. I really respect him. I think he seems like a legitimately bipartisan person when it comes to the COVID vaccine. I feel like he's not trying to push anything. He's not trying to shove anything down our throats. He doesn't have his own. His interest is actually to protect and to help people, which I actually really like. And in this clip, he says that natural immunity also helps, which a Pfizer scientist famously said in a Project Veritas clip from 2021, which is still probably one of the funniest clips I've ever seen.
Yes. You work for Pfizer, don't you? Ooh, I'm not doing this. You're a scientist at Pfizer.
Dude, do not. Absolutely not. What are you doing right now?
So you're on camera saying that the antibodies, if you've had COVID, are better at that point than your vaccination.
So your antibodies are probably better at that point than the vaccination.
But no, I actually really like what he says here. And he doesn't just say everyone should get the vaccine, even if you have natural immunity or whatever. He's saying if the benefits are clear, you should get it. He's not saying everybody needs to get it. I think even in this interview, at some point, he says that. I believe he even said it somewhere in this interview. I don't remember. The interview is like 2.5 hours long, so it's kind of hard to remember everything that he says. But he even says somewhere in here that if you don't necessarily need it, you don't need to get the vaccine. He even says it in there somewhere.
Just be honest. I just say the truth as you understand it, because I think when you don't do that, in the name of trying to help everybody, you lose some trust.
For sure. I think that it's almost scary to say that the government is trying to figure out the best way to convince us to get this thing done for our health, as opposed to just tell us the truth and allow us to decide. Right? Because the whole principle of autonomy when we're being doctors in a room is to allow the patient to decide for themselves what the best choice is and inform them as accurately as possible.
I actually really like what Dr. Mike says here. I agree with him completely on this. So the government was kind of like trying to force us to get the vaccine. They're like, hey, if you don't get the vaccine, this is going to happen to you, and then this is going to happen to you, and this is going to happen to you. Instead of just saying, hey, dude, this is good for your health. You should get this. This is good for your health. It'll do this, this, and this, and this. It has this in it, which will do this, and this will do that. And this is why it helps with COVID. But instead of just saying that, they're like, hey, if you don't get the COVID vaccine, we're just going to chop your head off. Basically, people lost their jobs and they're being punished. And they're like rewarding people. Like, oh, if you take the vaccine, you don't have to wear the mask anymore. Government really screwed up and dropped the ball on it too, in my opinion. I don't know if I mentioned this yet, but Cuomo didn't want anything to do with the vaccine. And then as soon as Biden takes office, he flips sides. He's like, oh, yeah, the vaccine's best. It's just insane to me. There's a funny video, and it says, imagine taking a vaccine so safe you have to be threatened to take it for a virus so dangerous that you have to be tested to know you have it. It's a pretty funny video. I don't know if you guys probably seen it. It's a pretty popular clip.
Oh, that's not true at all. And I've worked with the social media platforms into figuring out how they should manage misinformation. And that's such a difficult topic because when the hydroxychloroquine situation was ongoing, the social media companies kind of had a delayed response to it. So initially they were seeing like negative repercussions of folks taking hydroxychloroquine, farmers in Brazil taking their horse dewormers, and there was fatalities as a result. It was really wild what was happening across the globe when statements about hydroxychloroquine came out. So the social media companies, YouTube especially, said anything that mentions hydroxychloroquine, we're shutting down as a safety precaution.
For those of you who don't know, hydroxychloroquine is a treatment for malaria. And in 2020, India famously started using hydroxychloroquine to treat COVID. And it worked very well, actually. India, for those of you who don't know, were like the biggest country when it came to population-wise. And they had the lowest amount of COVID. Like, they had the lowest across the whole board, not percentage-wise. Like, literally, they had the least amount of COVID cases. And it was because of the hydroxychloroquine use. Now, I know if you look it up on Google, they're going to be like, oh, there's no evidence that says that hydroxychloroquine is the reason why the COVID was so low. But I could also argue there's no evidence that it wasn't the reason why COVID was so low. I don't know why everyone was against hydroxychloroquine and stuff like that. It was already something that's used as treatment for other viruses. So I don't see why it wouldn't be a good treatment for COVID.
If you start telling people that vaccines, if you start telling people very inaccurately that vaccines have a very proven tie to autism, you scare people away from getting vaccines, children get harmed, that's disinformation.
You're saying it's sort of direct evidence of harm versus evidence for potential harm.
So I've seen this argument for years now, the whole vaccines cause autism argument. And I cannot believe that this is a thing that's still a belief that people have. I still don't understand why anyone would think this way. Now, I don't want anyone to get the wrong idea. I'm not anti-vax everything. I wasn't supportive of the COVID vaccine because of all the propaganda and the politics behind it all. And I didn't feel like getting a vaccine for a disease that wasn't super dangerous, for me at least, and B, the vaccine that wasn't FDA approved. When it did get FDA approved, it was illegally FDA approved, which is just even more wild to me. And the idea how it was forced so hard for us to get it, I wasn't in support of it. However, I would still get the polio vaccine. I would still get many other vaccines. I still do. I don't know if I've gotten them recently because I just don't really think about it, don't really care enough. But I would get them. Like, I don't care about the flu vaccine. I'll get it. I'll get whatever vaccines there are. The problem I have with COVID, though, is, like I said, the politics behind it. Plus, it hasn't been experimented on enough. Also, I didn't get it because I'm based, but that's besides the point. Another thing I want to bring up, I think is super weird, is when I go to the doctor's office, I'll either do a checkup or for example, after a car accident, I was at the hospital talking to doctors. And the last few times I've been at the doctor's, they ask me, hey, did you get the COVID vaccine? I always tell them no, because I didn't. And they look back at me and they go, yeah, I only got the first one. And it's like, why would doctors care so much to like also bring up the point? It's like, is there something that is being hidden that we don't know about? Because like the last 3 times I've been to the hospital, other doctors have told me, oh yeah, I only got the first one just so I keep my job. And it's like, that's weird. Like you're a doctor, you're a health person. You're supposed to be like, yay, medicine. Like I didn't get the vaccine because I'm based. Like, why didn't you get the vaccine? I don't know. I think it's kind of wild. Anyways, I think I'm going to end the video here, guys. I hope you liked the video. Please leave a comment, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.